Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're plunging into a stack of sources covering a major White House action. A new proclamation significantly restricting travel into the U.S. from several countries. We've got, well, everything from the official document itself to news reports reflecting different perspectives and impacts.
That's right. And our mission here is to, pull out the crucial nuggets, cut through some of the noise, and really understand the core of this policy.
Like who's affected?
Exactly. Who's affected, the reasons the administration gives, and how the sources describe the reactions and potential consequences.
Right. It's about giving you the detailed breakdown you need to be truly well-informed on this specific development.
Precisely.
Absolutely. Okay, let's unpack this then. Our deep dive today focuses on the travel restrictions signed on June 4th, 2025.
Yep, June 4th.
And we're drawing directly from the sources you've provided to understand the policy and its immediate context.
Let's do it.
So, first things first, what exactly did President Trump sign on June 4th? Let's get the foundational facts from our sources on the table.
Okay. The central piece is a presidential proclamation. Its full title, as noted in the sources, is restricting the entry of foreign nationals to protect the United States from foreign terrorists and other national security and public safety threats. Bit of a mouthful.
It is. And what does it do?
According to the sources, this proclamation implements a full ban on entry for nationals from 12 specific countries.
12, okay.
And it also imposes partial restrictions on travel from another 7 countries.
And when does this actually go into effect? That seems like a critical detail.
It moves pretty quickly. Sources from the White House and news reports confirm it becomes effective just days after signing.
How soon?
12:01 a.m. on June 9th, 2025. So yeah, very soon after the announcement.
Wow, that's rapid. Which countries are we talking about? Give us the list from the sources who faces the full ban and who has partial restrictions.
Okay, the sources are quite clear on this list. The 12 countries facing a full suspension of entry for their nationals are Afghanistan, Burma, Chad, Republic of the Congo, Equatorial Guinea, Eritrea, Haiti, Iran, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and Yemen.
That's the full ban list. And the partial.
Right. For the other 7 countries with partial restrictions, that's Burundi, Cuba, Laos, Sierra Leone, Togo, Turkmenistan, and Venezuela. The directive is for U.S. consular officers to reduce the validity of non-immigrant visas.
So not a complete stop, but making it harder or shorter-term stays.
Exactly. Tightening access, essentially.
All right, now that we know what the proclamation does and who is directly impacted, let's dig into the why.
The rationale.
Yeah. The administration states this is about protecting the U.S. What specific reasons do the sources, particularly the proclamation itself, give for these restrictions?
Well, the official proclamation provides the administration's primary justification. It frames the policy explicitly around national security and public safety.
Okay, that's the headline reason.
Right. Emphasizing the need for vigilant screening and vetting in the visa process to protect against foreign terrorists and other threats.
And it references specific findings to back this up, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. It points to a report from April 9th, 2025.
April 9th. Okay.
According to the proclamation, this report found that the vetting and screening information available for these particular countries was insufficient.
Insufficient to meet U.S. standards for entry.
Correct. Insufficient to warrant not suspending entry, basically. It references authority under Section 212 of the INA.
INA, that's the Immigration and Nationality Act, correct? The foundational law governing immigration.
Exactly. And Section 212F grants the president pretty broad authority to suspend the entry of foreign nationals if they're deemed, detrimental to U.S. interests.
Gotcha. Any other reasons mentioned in the proclamation text?
Yes. It also notes another issue, that some countries have reportedly taken advantage of the U.S. visa system.
How so?
And failed to cooperate in accepting back their nationals who are subject to removal orders from the U.S. repatriation issues.
Ah, okay. That makes sense as a stated concern. Now, interestingly, one news source mentions a specific recent event potentially accelerating the signing.
Right.
What does that source report?
Yeah, that source highlights that while the proclamation was apparently already under consideration...
So it was in the works.
Seems so. But President Trump reportedly made the final decision to sign it following the antisemitic attack in Boulder, Colorado.
So that recent event might have pushed it forward.
The report suggests Sunday's assault acted as a catalyst. Yeah, speeding up the process.
So we have the broad national security rationale, issues with vetting and repatriation, and potentially a response to a specific attack. Do the sources get even more granular?
They do.
Like explaining the specific reasons cited for restricting entry from individual countries on the list?
They absolutely do. The proclamation goes country by country, detailing concerns. For example, it cites high visa overstay rates for non-immigrant visitors.
Like students.
Yeah, students and exchange visitors, the FM and J visa categories. It mentions a 29.3% overstay rate for Afghanistan, or a strikingly high 55.64% for Chad in those categories.
Wow, over half for Chad in those groups.
Right. It also describes some nations as lacking competent authorities to issue secure travel documents, or being unwilling or unable to share information needed for effective vetting.
So information sharing is a big piece.
Seems to be. Specific security concerns are also highlighted, like identifying Iran as a state sponsor of terrorism, or describing the government of Somalia as lacking control over its territory, making it a potential haven for terrorists.
And Haiti. I remember seeing that on the list.
Yeah, for Haiti, the proclamation mentions concerns about an influx harming U.S. communities and, again, the lack of a central authority needed for proper screening of potential entrants.
So it's a mix of reasons overstays, vetting capacity, specific security situations.
Exactly. It's presented as a detailed breakdown of diverse issues, varying by country.
That specific detail about visa overstay rates is fascinating, 55% for Chad in those categories. Does any source provide historical context for those numbers, or maybe compare them to countries not on the list?
That's a good question. The provided sources list the overstay numbers for the specific countries on the list.
Right.
But they don't really include broader historical comparisons or data for countries not subject to the restrictions, at least not in the snippets we have.
Okay.
The focus in the sources seems to be on presenting these numbers as a key part of the administration's stated rationale for including these specific countries.
Got it. Suggesting overstay rates are a significant metric they're using to identify potential security or public safety concerns.
That seems to be the implication presented in the proclamation text itself.
Now, this isn't the first time travel restrictions have been a policy tool under President Trump, is it?
No, it's not.
Do the sources offer any historical perspective on this?
Yes, one source points out this echoes actions taken in his first term.
The one affecting several majority Muslim nations.
That's the one. Specifically, the policy that initially barred travelers from 7 majority Muslim nations. That earlier policy, you might remember, faced significant court challenges.
Right, lots of legal battles.
Before ultimately being repealed by President Biden.
Yeah.
So there's a precedent for using executive action in this way, and also a history of legal and political pushback.
Okay, so with a policy affecting so many countries and individuals, there must be exceptions, right?
Yes, there are.
Who can still potentially enter the U.S. from these nations, according to the proclamation as described in the sources.
The proclamation lists several important exceptions. These include U.S. lawful permanent residents, green card holders.
Okay, that makes sense.
Also, individuals traveling on a passport from a country not subject to the restrictions, even if they're a national of a restricted country.
Interesting distinction. Dual nationals, maybe?
Potentially, or someone residing elsewhere with a different passport. Also, certain foreign nationals already holding valid non-immigrant visas in specific classifications, like diplomats,
government officials, that sort of thing.
Exactly. And interestingly, the sources note exceptions specifically for athletes, coaches, and support staff participating in major international sporting events.
Oh, like the World Cup or Olympics.
Precisely those examples are mentioned.
So World Cup athletes from, say, Iran or Afghanistan could potentially still compete in the U.S. under this.
Based on that specific exception listed in the proclamation and reported in the sources, yes, that appears to be the intent for major sporting events.
What other exceptions are there?
Other exceptions include immediate relative immigrants' spouses, children of U.S. citizens, for example.
Okay, family reunification.
Individuals with adoption visas, Afghan Special Immigrant Visa holders, often called SIVs.
Right, those who worked with the U.S.?
Yes. Also, U.S. government employees and their dependents applying for SIVs, and immigrants from Iran seeking protection due to religious persecution.
That's quite a list of carve-outs.
And the proclamation also includes a provision for case-by-case waivers under specific conditions, though the details on how easy those are to get aren't fully fleshed out in these sources.
Let's focus on those Afghan special immigrant visas for a moment. You mentioned that one source highlighted the impact on Afghans who worked with the U.S. during the war. What does that report tell us?
Yeah, a CNN report specifically addresses this. It notes that the barring of nationals from Afghanistan under this proclamation could have a significant impact on Afghans who aided the U.S. effort.
How so? Are they not covered by the SIV exception?
Well, the report states that thousands of these individuals have already faced delays and uncertainty due to prior administrative orders, so there's existing backlog and difficulty.
Okay, so it adds another layer.
Critically, this proclamation, according to the CNN report, also suspends refugee admissions programs and aid funding specifically designated for Afghan SIV holders.
So it affects the program supporting them, even if the visa itself is technically accepted.
That seems to be the concern raised. Sean Vandiver of #AfghaniVac is quoted directly in that report.
What did he say?
He says this ban disproportionately affects families and individuals seeking lawful entry.
Okay.
And he describes it as a strategic move, not a response to an immediate threat. So, questioning the timing and rationale.
Understanding the details of who is affected and how is crucial. Now let's turn to how different groups have reacted to this proclamation, according to our sources.
Right. The reactions, they've been sharp and varied, based on the sources we have.
Let's start with the administration's side.
Okay. On one side, we see the administration's perspective. White House Deputy Press Secretary Abigail Jackson is quoted describing the restrictions.
How does she frame it?
As common sense measures that are necessary to protect Americans. Pretty straightforward defense.
Okay. And the counterpoints. How are critics responding? Beyond the #AfghaniVac comments.
Well, as we just heard, Sean Vandiver views it critically disproportionate, a strategic move, challenging the idea it's a response to an immediate threat.
Right. What about internationally?
We also see international reactions captured in the sources. Venezuela's Minister of Interior, Justice and Peace, Diosdado Cabello, offered a particularly pointed reaction.
What was his take?
He's quoted suggesting that being in the U.S. itself is a big risk for anyone, not just Venezuelans, adding, if you're really that foolish, then go to the United States.
Wow. That's quite a statement. Any other reactions from humanitarian groups, perhaps?
Yes. Oxfam issued a statement. They warned that the proclamation marks a chilling return to policies of fear, discrimination, and division.
What was their main concern?
Their concern, as reported, is that it denies entry to individuals fleeing war and persecution, potentially forcing them into dangerous conditions.
So, a strong humanitarian critique there.
Definitely. We see clear lines drawn in the sand regarding the justification and the perceived impact of this policy.
Okay, this proclamation wasn't happening in a vacuum, as you mentioned earlier with the Boulder attack link. Our sources also touch on other news from June 4th that feels connected to this broader area of immigration and border policy.
That's right. There were other related developments.
What else were these articles reporting on that same day?
It's interesting to see the constellation of related events happening concurrently. One article notes that on the same day, June 4th, a federal judge in Colorado issued a temporary block on the Trump administration's attempt to deport the wife and children of the suspect in that recent Boulder attack we mentioned.
Connecting back to that event again.
Exactly. Another headline reports that President Trump is also taking steps to bar Harvard international students from entering the U.S.
A separate action targeting students.
Seems like it, specifically Harvard in that report. And importantly, there's a report about the Supreme Court.
What did they rule?
They issued a ruling that allows President Trump to suspend deportation protections for immigrants from Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela.
Wait, several of those countries, Cuba, Haiti, Venezuela, are also on the list for this new travel proclamation, aren't they?
They are indeed. Cuba, Haiti, and Venezuela are among the 7 facing partial restrictions. Nicaragua is mentioned in the Supreme Court case, but not this proclamation.
So these simultaneous developments really highlight the administration's wide-ranging focus on immigration restrictions across different fronts, all on that specific day.
Yeah, it paints a picture of a broader policy push happening at that moment.
That context is crucial. This has been a deep dive into a lot of detailed information, the specific countries affected, the official reasons cited, the nuances of the exceptions, the very different reactions.
It's a lot to process.
It is. For you, our listener, why is it so important to go beyond the headlines and dig into these specifics directly from the sources?
Well, understanding these details, like the specific metrics cited in the proclamation, the overstay rates, the claims about insufficient vetting.
Right, the actual mechanics.
Or the precise list of exceptions. It allows you to form a much more concrete picture of the policy itself. You move from a general idea of travel ban to understanding the mechanisms and criteria being used.
More than just a label.
Exactly. And seeing the administration's rationale presented alongside the concerns raised by humanitarian organizations, the reactions from foreign officials, all drawn from the sources, provides that multifaceted view.
Appreciating the complexity.
Right. It helps you appreciate the complexity and the varied real-world impacts, equipping you with the specific factual points needed to think critically about this policy rather than just react to the headlines.
We've navigated through the sources covering this significant travel restriction signed on June 4th, examining who is affected, the administration's stated reasons, the detailed exceptions, and the range of reactions from the sources.
We've seen how the policy is framed by the administration primarily through the lens of security and vetting concerns.
Yeah, with specific data points like visa overstay rates presented as justification.
Right. And simultaneously, we've heard from critics in the sources who emphasize the humanitarian consequences and question the necessity and fairness of the restrictions.
So, as you continue to follow the ongoing discussions around immigration and national security, here's a thought to consider, drawn from the different facets we've explored in these sources.
Okay.
Given the administration's stated goals for this proclamation and the diverse array of impacts and criticisms described across the sources, what kind of specific, verifiable information or data would you need to see to feel confident in evaluating whether this policy is truly achieving its stated objectives, effectively and justly?
That's a really good question to ponder. What evidence would actually demonstrate success or failure and fairness?